Guides in GIMP provide you with a really easy way to line things up in your image. So the simplest way to create a guide is just to take the Move tool, and then you go into these ruler areas and just click and drag into your image, and here we have some guides. So you can then, for example, take your text tool and line up a text box right on that guide and type something like 1 day program. And I could change the color there to something like white. And we could increase the size perhaps. Maybe right up to something like 250 pixels. And once that was in place, if I wanted to create some other kind of object, I could align it, perhaps even another text box, along the same line, and you're going to get a nice finished effect. Notice that these guides are not going to print, and if you save this image as a JPEG or a GIF or whatever, they're not going to show up there either. There are a few other things to know about guides. If you go to the image menu, then you will find the item guides, which has a sub-menu. At the bottom, you can click this to remove all the guides. You can also create a new guide by percent. So the percent here is going to be the percent along either this horizontal or vertical edge. So at the moment it says vertical and I've got it set to 50. So that creates a guide exactly 50% or halfway across the image. If I was to then click that again and change this to horizontal, I now have a point which is the exact center of my image, which can be very useful. Another way that you can create guides is simply with the new guide option. So now you can actually specify the pixel position where you want the guide to be. Unfortunately, there's no way to change the measurement units. So even though this is set to 500, although you might expect the guide to come here where it says 500, you'll see that it actually doesn't, and that's because these are millimeters, and this guide is going to come in based on 500 pixels. You can then also create a new guide from selection. So if I select my rectangular select tool and make a selection, and then go image, guides, new guide from selection, you see that it creates a guide along every single edge of this selection box. So if I deselect there, we now have some guides over here, and that can be very useful. There are a few other things that you can set to do with guides. Under the View menu, you have this option, Show Guides. If you turn this off, then you're simply not going to see any of your guides, and of course you can just turn it back on. And another option that you have is Snap to Guides. Now what Snap to Guides does is it causes images, when they get very close to a guide, to just snap right into place. So if, for example, I was to create just a rectangle, a colored rectangle like this, could create a new layer and then just fill it perhaps with this background white color. A few other useful features to do with guides can be found under the View menu. So first of all, you can see this option which says Show Guides. If you turn that off, then obviously you won't be able to see them, and you can just turn them back on like that. If you go in the View menu to Snap to Guides and turn that on, what that will do is cause images which are dragged really close to the guides to snap into place. So just to show you how that'll work, I can just make a selection, and then I'm going to get my paint bucket and just fill it with this background white color. Now if I take my Move tool and I move this layer just slightly up towards this guide, you can also go to the View menu and turn on or off this Snap to Guides option. If this is on, what it does is anytime something is dragged, be it an object, an image on another layer, or perhaps just a selection like this, when it gets really close to the guides, it'll actually snap into place. So if I take the Move tool and I say move selection, I could then move this selection, and as I get to this corner, it snaps right into place there. You can also go up to the View menu and turn on this Snap to Guides option. It's actually on by default, and if it's off, like this, then when I move something, and this can be anything, an object, it can be a selection like this, if I take my Move tool and move this close to these guides, nothing is really going to happen. And I can try to line it up by eye, but there's a much easier way to work. With this Snap to Guides option on, if I now start dragging the selection towards these guides, you can see that when I just get a little bit close, it immediately snaps. And so I know that that is now absolutely perfectly aligned. So that's the basics of guides. There is